most dangerous man in the world isn't the strongest or the richest. It's the man who lives by no code at all. Just look around you. Men drifting through life with no standards, without honour, without integrity. Men who chase pleasure over purpose, comfort over courage. Ancient warriors understood. The samurai had the Bushido, a code of honour. Vikings lived by the 9 noble virtues. Spartans followed an unbreakable ethos that guided their every single breath, every choice, every single battle. Yet, today, most men live by convenience, not commitment. They've abandoned their values when tested. Trade honour for ease and wonder why they feel empty, directionless, powerless. And here's the real awakened savage truth. Without a code, you're lost. Without honour, you're weak. And today I'll show you exactly how to reclaim that strength, your dignity, and your power by creating your own modern warrior's code. Right? Let me tell you exactly why living by a code matters. Because I've lived the consequences of not having one. For years, I had no true north. I was driven by impulse, moods, cravings. If it felt good in the moment, boom, I went for it. If it was hard, uncomfortable, or inconvenient, I avoided that. Now, on the outside, I convinced people I was strong, I was confident, I was successful. But inside, I was hollow, empty, weak, ashamed. See, I grew up in mental chaos, right? Gangs, violence, addiction, crime. There was no clear standards in my world. It was just survival. Nobody taught me about honour, discipline, integrity. Nobody showed me what it meant to keep your word, right? Or stand by your principles when painful, right? What I learned was manipulation. I learned how to wear masks. I learned how to pretend. My early 20s, or even my late teenage years, my 20s, my 30s, they were just a blur of impulsivity and reaction. If life tested me, I folded. If I was tempted, I caved. Relationships shattered to pieces. Trust was broken. Right? Worst of all, I had no respect for myself. I knew I was betraying something deep within me, but I didn't even have the language for it yet. I had no clue. It wasn't until after I had my spiritual awakening, when I was still high on the experience, my eyes were open to a reality I never knew existed. And when I started receiving messages, channeled messages from Archangel Michael, Uriel, Jesus, and even connecting with the Pleiadian ancestors, I thought I was going crazy, right? And it was overwhelming, but at the same time, it was so exciting. Okay, because I went from believing that I was destined for pure misery to being told that I'm here for a reason, that I was chosen. So this flipped my world upside down. But deep down, I knew I wasn't ready yet. And this was just the beginning. This was just the doorway, not the destination. So I knew that I had work to do, and I went all in on personal development. Right, whatever I could do to try and improve myself, training every day in the gym, meditating, journaling, reading books, taking courses, doing all the right things, hiring coaches. And one of the coaches I hired, and he said something that no other one had said to me. And he said to me, Lachlan, you have no code, right? And at that point there, I didn't know anything about honor code. I didn't know about the ancient traditions or anything like that. So I didn't get it right away. Right. But those words rattled about my mind for I don't even know how long. Because deep down I knew he was right. So I started studying all the ancient warrior cultures, right? The samurai's Bushido, the Spartans' ethos. But it was the Vikings' 9 noble virtues that really struck a chord. Right. I've always had this connection. I don't know where it came from to the Viking energy. And even at one point, if you'd have seen me 2 or 3 years ago, I had the big dreadlocks, the beard, the tattoos, it was just, I looked like a modern day Viking, right? And but this is the thing. When I was so kind of getting into this, the look, it wasn't for aesthetics. I think it was something that was inside me calling, right? So when I went dive into this research, I realised so many powerful things. But I understood that the warriors weren't strong because of the weapons or the armour that they used. They were strong because of the clarity, the integrity, and the honour. They all had a code, no matter what warrior tradition you look at, the ancient ones, they had a code, a set of non-negotiable standards that guided every action, every choice, every decision they made, every breath they took. And this is when I made my decision. So I knew that I had to create my own code, right? Which was applicable in today's world. And I wrote down exactly who I wanted to be, what I stood for, right? What I would never compromise, and how I would live every single day. And that code became my anchor, right? It became my compass, a source of real, authentic strength. So I decided that my integrity mattered more than comfort, right? That being courageous mattered more than, convenience, and that my world mattered more than some temporary pleasure. And this is when things started to change. Because, see, for the first time in my life, my actions aligned with what I was saying, my deeper truth. My confidence wasn't an act anymore, right? My relationships grew deeper and more connected, right? I had much sharper clarity. I became the man that I used to pretend I was, right? And now I was living this man, right? And this was not something that was easy to do because it was so much conditioning I had to overcome, and I had to learn the hard way, right? Because a man without a code will always betray himself. But a man with a code, he can face anything and still remain unbroken. Because even since then, I've had so many ups and downs where in the past it would have broke me. I would be back drinking, taking drugs, but because I have this honor code that I stick to, that I will not bend or break for nobody. And even on this journey of YouTube, I've committed to 75 days, and for the past 3 weeks, I have been, when I say ill, I mean I have been ill. I have struggled with energy. I have struggled to do, anything. But I committed to this, and when I say I'm committed, I'm doing it. And even now, I'm still ill. But you know what? I'm here because I said I'm going to do it, and I stick by my word, right? And this journey, when you look at your code and your values and your honor code, it's also a spiritual aspect here. Because what I discovered on this journey, that when you live without a code of honor, you're rejecting your spiritual inheritance as a warrior. And we are all warriors. If you're watching this, you are a fucking warrior, right? For years, I mistakenly believed spirituality was about love, light, freedom, rainbows, unicorns, just, you know, everything's all rosy, just live in the moment, follow your heart, right? All that kind of stuff. But authentic spiritual growth isn't about unlimited freedom. It's about sacred commitment, right? In fact, every spiritual tradition emphasizes that true liberation comes through discipline, not through its absence, right? And the if you look at any of the spiritual traditions, they contain the same, teachings, the same truth. Freedom comes not from avoiding commitment, but from making the right commitment or right choices. Right? Buddhism teaches the noble eightfold path, right? A code of ethical and mental discipline that leads to freedom, liberation. In Judaism and Christianity, the covenant represents a sacred bond between God and man with clear obligations and rewards. Right? Islamic warriors live by the fatwa, right? A chivalric code that emphasizes generosity, bravery, and truth. Right? And then the indigenous traditions worldwide, they use Vision Quest to reveal the personal medicine and obligations of each warrior. Right? There's a pattern here that modern men have forgotten. Spiritual power doesn't come from unlimited options. It comes from the sacred limitation, voluntary embraced. And when I finally understood this spiritually, I realized my resistance to living by a code wasn't protecting my freedom, it was preventing my transformation. And true spiritual strength isn't found in doing whatever you want, it's found in binding yourself to principles worthy of your highest potential. Right? And when you look at the ancient Stoics, they were the masters of self governance. Right? They understood, something, crucial about honor codes. When they said freedom is not achieved by satisfying desires, but by eliminating it. So, in other words, true freedom comes not from having unlimited choices, but from making the right ones consistently. Okay, the Stoics practiced disciplined living, not because they were rigid, but because they understood that a man governed by his appetite is never truly free. They recognized that living by principle rather than impulse is what separates the wise from the foolish. So, obviously, when I began to apply these Stoic principles in my life, I realized that every decision guided by my honor code, every moment of choosing the difficult right thing over the easy wrong thing, wasn't limiting my freedom. It was creating the only kind of freedom that matters. Freedom from my lower nature. Right? And when you look at it psychologically, there's clear explanation for why honor code creates a powerful man. Your actions shape your identity, and your identity determines your actions. Right, psychologists call this the identity-based behavior. When you commit to living by specific principles, you're not just changing your behavior, you're literally reshaping who you believe yourself to be. And if you look at what James Clear, what he says, every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Right, this is why men with clear honor codes display such consistent behavioral patterns. Right? They make decisions quickly and confidently. They resist manipulation and peer pressure. They recover rapidly from setbacks, and they inspire trust without demanding it. Right? These aren't personality traits. Right? They are the natural outcome of a man who knows exactly who he is and what he stands for. And when you couple that with what modern neuroscience confirms that the ancient cultures already knew, that your brain functions optimally when operating with clear moral boundaries. Right? When you establish and follow an honor code, you activate the prefrontal cortex, right? So that's the executive center responsible for long-term decision making and impulse control, right? While simultaneously reducing activity in the amygdala, the fear center, driven by, immediate survival concerns. And Dr. Andrew Huberman, his research basically says having clear principles reduce decision fatigue and cortisol. And cortisol is the stress hormone, right? So when you're predetermined your response to certain situations through your honor code, then you eliminate decision paralysis, reduce stress and anxiety, increase focus attention, enhance resilience to social pressure. So, in other words, your brain literally functions better when guided by principles rather than impulses. When you connect these four perspectives, the insight becomes undeniable, right? Spiritually, stoicism, psychologically, neurologically, living by an honor code is the path to power. The difference between the ordinary man and the warrior isn't talent, circumstance, or luck. It's the willingness to bind himself to principles greater than momentary desire. Right? And this is the thing, right? Understanding this all intellectually isn't enough. Right? And this is, as I've said before, information without integration is just entertainment. The shift will only happen, when the identity, so who you believe yourself to be at your core. So for years, I lived from the identity of a man who valued freedom above all, freedom from obligation, from judgment, from constraint. My unconscious belief was commitments limit me. Flexibility keeps me safe. And guess what? Reality always conforms to your deepest beliefs about yourself. So the day things changed wasn't when I learned more, it was when I chose a different identity. Right? I am a warrior bound by honor, not some wanderer bound by nothing. Okay, and this identity shift, wasn't positive thinking or a wishful affirmation. It was a decision that I made in the moment of clarity, a decision to stop drifting and start standing for what I believe in. And see, from that day forward, I approach life differently, every decision differently, how I treat people differently. Because when temptation pops its head, I just look at my code, right? So I measure my code rather than whatever it is that's trying to tempt me into what they're doing. And when, I have challenges, which we all do, I face them with the predetermined principle rather than a reactive emotion, right? Because when I'm offered the easy wrong or the difficult right, I choose based on character, not convenience. So your transformation begins the moment that you decide. I am no longer the man without direction. I am a warrior governed by honor. And this isn't about being perfect or rigid. True warriors, we fall and we fail, right? They just refuse to make the same mistakes or compromise twice. Path from drifting to direction isn't about eliminating choice, it's about elevating the criteria by which you make your choice. And this identity shift can happen right now, in this moment, if you're willing to make that decision. Right? You can understand the importance of a code. You can respect the samurai, the Stoics, the Vikings, but none of it matters unless you claim it for yourself. Because right now, you are faced with a simple truth. You are already living by a code. It just might be an unconscious one. The code of convenience, the code of approval, the code of avoiding discomfort, the code of what's easiest right now. And here is the reality of that. If you don't consciously define your code, you unconsciously follow someone else's. Society will give you its code. Stay safe, stay small, stay numb. Right? Your fears will give you their code. Avoid risk, avoid pain, avoid growth. Your ego will chirp in, prove yourself, perform, pretend. But see a warrior, see an awakened savage, he doesn't outsource his compass. He defines it, he claims it, he lives it every fucking day. This is an identity shift from a man who reacts to a man who chooses. Right? From a man being swayed by his emotion to a man guided by principles. From being a man who wonders what to do to a man who already knows who he is. Right? The code is not just about what you do, it's about who you are. When you define your personal honor code, give yourself a structure of being. It's not about being perfect, it's about being aligned. You won't always feel motivated. You won't always feel confident. But your code doesn't care how you feel. Your code is non-negotiable standard for how you operate in this world. It becomes your inner compass. Right? This is why I have my compass here. You see it? Becomes your inner compass when the world gets loud. It becomes your anchor when shit gets chaotic. And it becomes your mirror when you start bullshitting yourself. Right? And see, every time you live in alignment with it, you reinforce a new identity, a man of integrity, a man of discipline, a man of presence, a man with purpose. Right? That identity becomes your foundation, not based on what you've achieved, not based on how you feel today, but based on the simple, powerful fact that you live by your word. This is how trust is rebuilt. This is how confidence is earned. This is how self-respect is gained. Right? Because it's easy to admire, samurai codes and Stoic philosophy and the Viking virtues. But admiration without embodiment, that is just fantasy. Right? The man who shifts is the man who asks, what do I stand for? What do I refuse to tolerate? What are my non-negotiables? How do I want to show up when life gets fucking hard? That's the birth of your code. That's the moment a man evolves. Okay, you're not adding more fluff to your life. You're cutting away all the bullshit that no longer aligns with it. And this is how you integrate the code in your identity, right? It's no longer something you do. It's who you are, right? So let's put this into actual practice, right? Okay, because before you can create an honor code, you must uncover what principles already guide you, both consciously and unconsciously. So take 60 minutes of solitude, no phone, no distractions. Get a pen, paper, and answer these questions with 100% brutal honesty. What three moments in your life made you feel most proud? Right? What values were you honouring? Right? What three decisions do you most regret? Right? What principles did you compromise? Name three men you deeply respect. What specific qualities do they embody? What behaviour in others instantly loses your respect? What does this reveal about your values? If you could be remembered for embodying just three qualities, what would they be? Okay, this excavation isn't about wishful thinking. It's about uncovering your authentic core values. You can't create an honor code that will last if it doesn't align with your deepest truth. Okay, step number two. This is where we study the warrior traditions, just like I did. right? Your personal honor code will be stronger when informed by the wisdom of history's greatest warriors. Right? So over the next week, study at least 3 historical honor codes, right? The Bushido, right? So it's the way of the samurai: courage, integrity, compassion, respect, honesty, honor, loyalty, duty. Right? The Viking 9 noble virtues: courage, truth, honor, fidelity, discipline, hospitality, self-reliance, industriousness, and perseverance. Right? Then you've got the the Knight's Code of Chivalry: courage, justice, mercy, generosity, faith, nobility, hope. Right? The Stoic virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. The Apache warrior values: right? Courage, generosity, wisdom, respect. Right? And for each tradition, identify which principles resonate most deeply with you. Right? Which would be most challenging to uphold, and which seem most relevant to modern life. Right? Don't just simply copy these codes. Learn from them. They've endured for centuries because they speak to something timeless in the masculine spirit. Okay, and once you've done that and you've gained that wisdom, then you can draft your personal code, right? And this is where we look at putting things on paper, one that will guide you for the rest of your life, right? So create a code with these characteristics, right? So concise, 5 to 9 core principles. More than that becomes difficult to remember and apply. Right? Be clear. Each principle should be stated in simple language, right? Not big fancy words and all that. And challenging. If your code doesn't demand more of the average man, it's too weak. Right? Consistent. No principles should contradict each other. Okay, complete. Right? Together, your principles should cover all major areas of life. So your fitness, your family, your fulfillment, your finances. Okay, so what's some examples here? Right? Right? I speak truth even when silence would serve me better. Right? I never punish honesty, whether from myself or others. I keep my word regardless of convenience or cost. I defend the vulnerable, especially when it's dangerous to do so. I take complete responsibility for everything in my life. I choose discomfort in service of growth. I serve something greater than myself. Right, so write your draft code by hand, not digitally. Right, there's power in physically, writing these words down. Okay, then we go to the 4th step. So we do now do a stress test on your honor code. Right, because a code that hasn't been tested isn't a code, it's just words on paper. So over the next 2 weeks, stress test your draft code. Right, review each principle daily during a morning reflection. Right, for each principle, identify 3 real life situations where it would be difficult to uphold. Right, mentally rehearse choosing principle over convenience in each situation. Now, at the end of the day, review any moments where your principles were tested and refine any principles that proved, impractical or unclear. So after about 2 weeks, revise your code based on these real world tests. Okay, a strong code should be both aspirational and practical, challenging but achievable with focused effort. Right, and then we move to step number 5. This is the sacred commitment. Right, now comes the moment of truth when words become bonds. Create a personal ritual to formalize your commitment. Right, this could be different for everyone. Choose a meaningful location, and at a meaningful time. Right, and dawn is traditionally powerful. Right, create or obtain a physical representation of your code. Right, so like handwritten on quality paper. Okay, so you can do this yourself, but I would invite, 1 to 3 men you deeply respect, to witness. And this is optional, but it's powerful because that is alone is going to take you out of your comfort zone. Okay. You're going to stand on nail, hold your physical tool, right? And speak each principle out loud. Now, after each principle, this I will uphold through comfort and pain until my final day. Right? Place your code somewhere you can see it every single day. This isn't just theatrics, right? This is pattern interruption. You're literally programming your subconscious mind to recognize these principles as a sacred bond. So from this day forward, you review your code every morning. Evaluate, whether you've been sticking to it. Share your code with those closest to you. Revise it annually, but only with serious reflection. Okay? Remember, this battle plan isn't just, theory. It's exactly what transformed me from a a bottomless pit addicted man without direction to a warrior guided by principles living his best life. Right? Follow it. Right? And your transformation will be inevitable. Okay, brother? Because listen, your honor code you created isn't limitation, it's the foundations of your freedom. Every single warrior throughout history, every samurai, every knight, tribal champion, became legendary not by avoiding commitment, but by binding himself to principles greater than momentary desire. You're not born to drift. You're born to stand up strong, not to compromise. Right? You're not born to negotiate with your potential. You're born to stand for something greater, to live by a code, to be initiated into the ancient brotherhood of men who choose honour over ease. And the principles that you've been avoiding, the courage, the integrity, the discipline, the loyalty, they aren't burdens to bear. They're the very foundations upon which you can build a life of power, meaning, respect. There isn't an ancient path of manhood that isn't rooted in an honour code. Right? A man becomes a warrior not through freedom from commitment, but through the right commitments, fiercely kept. So here's what I want you to do now. Okay? Just commit publicly. I choose honour over convenience. Share one principle you're ready to live by without compromise in the comments. Okay? Join the brotherhood. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Every video we're going to be diving deep into what it means to be an awakened savage, a warrior. Okay? Share this with a brother. You know another man who's sitting there on his knees drifting, right? A man without a code. Send it to him. Not just to inspire him, but to break him out of his shell and make him rise. Because remember, the world is full of men with no direction. And what we need is more warriors to rise up. Okay, who are ready to live with honour. Not men who are going to give in to instant gratification, impulse. Right? Your transformation starts today, not tomorrow, not next week, but you make that decision to live by a code worthy of your potential. Because, brother, I believe in you. I love you. I'll honour your journey and I'll walk beside you every step of the way. But you need to meet me halfway and commit to living by the code. Okay, I'll catch you on the next one. I've got a video for you here and you can subscribe here. Much love, guys. Take care.